What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have a lot to go over, as there were quite a bit of upsets over the weekend, such as Purdue knocking off Wisconsin at home. Never underestimate the power of the Boilermakers and Dave Shondell. And how about Illinois, the Fighting Illini? You thought they were just good in football, didn't you? Well, they're good in volleyball as well. Big win for Illinois. And how about UCLA just putting the beat down on Washington? How'd they do it? And what does this mean for the Bruins going forward? Also, we have the committee's top 10 reveal that was revealed yesterday. And we have the most recent top 25 coaches poll that was revealed as well. So set up the net. Hand me a volleyball, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon. It's great to be talking some volleyball with everybody here and to all my volleyball friends and family. And now, without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. First sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. The Warriors unfortunately dropped one to the Moreno Valley Mercury 32-26 in the final game of the regular season as they finished the season 4-6. And yes, I was told about this and it was very heartbreaking. However, due to a playoff scenario going their way, the Warriors have made the playoffs and they will await to see who they take on next week. So that is awesome sauce for the Warriors. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to trout for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors. You can also follow them on Instagram at SouthernCalifornia_Warriors. You can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word Southern, then California, then Warriors. The second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Freeman take care of that for you. Kit founded and has managed Background Check International since 1994 and is here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. This business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or any other illegal activity. They do not have Twitter or Instagram, but they have Facebook. Just type in the word background, then check, then international, then put a nice little dash there and put BCI. You can also follow them on their website, www.bcint.com. So thank you to SoCal Warriors and Background Check International Businesses for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. You can follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio. You can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then sports, then radio. Then by going to the website, www.iesportsradio.com, you can check that out as well. Now let's get on into the NCAA women's volleyball action. So, there were a lot of upsets over the weekend. Some were considered upsets, and then some weren't like full upsets. We'll start on Friday, and we'll start with this upset that happened on Friday, and this came to me as a surprise at first, and then I found out what the true deal was, and this one came courtesy of Arizona and Stanford, as Arizona just swept Stanford. It was the third straight time the Wildcats defeated Stanford. Now, you're probably wondering, how the heck did Stanford lose? Stanford is a very talented team. Arizona's not that talented, are they? Well, unfortunately for Stanford, they did not have the services of 3 players. They did not have the services of Kendall Kipp, who is their big outside hitter, and that is a huge loss for them. They also didn't have the services of Cami Minor, their freshman setter, and that's a bigger loss. And then they also did not have the services of Alana Ogolive, as she's one of their defensive specialists and dig leaders. So, unfortunately, that wasn't convenient for them. And it really sucks for Stanford that they are shorthanded. But I think they will be able to persevere. And Ogolive is actually their libero. So they had to basically shuffle up their entire lineup. And actually, it wasn't Ogolive. They still had Ogolive for their little matchup against Arizona. Unfortunately, they did not have Kip, Cami Minor, and Alex Lugier. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but forgive me if I'm not. But not having those players just is not good. And Alex Lugier is their defensive specialist. She's the defensive specialist. Ogolive is the libero. Anyway, for this matchup against Arizona basically just muscled their way past a shorthanded Stanford team, as Sophie Maldonado Diaz had 15 kills, Puck Stubb had 12 kills, and no one on Stanford had double digits in terms of kills. In terms of digs, Arizona outdug Stanford 46-39. In terms of hitting percentage, Arizona hit .303 compared to Stanford's 176. And in terms of service aces and service errors, this one actually came to me as a surprise. Both teams had 5 aces and 9 errors. And then in terms of blocks, Arizona and Stanford had the same number of blocks as a team. It's just that Arizona had 2 solo stuffs and 8 block assists, while Stanford had 12 block assists, which translates into 6 blocks as a team. So, yeah, it was rather a bummer that Stanford lost. I did not see this coming until I found out that those players that I just mentioned, Alex, Kendall, and Cami, were out with injury, and it really sucks. And again, if they can get as healthy as possible, that would be great. But I think Stanford having to deal with the injury bug is not convenient for them. The Cardinal was led by Katie Baird, who has been a solid piece for the Stanford offense, as she had 8 kills. Sammy Francis had 7 kills, and then Natalie Birdie and McKenna Vicini each had 5. So all in all for Stanford, it just wasn't their night, and it showed, honestly. So it's disappointing, but hey, what can you do? As we say hello to Marcus Lewis Great in the chat room, he says, what up, Doe? Yes, what up to you too, buddy? Thank you for tuning in. So now let's jump on over to Saturday's upsets. We'll circle the wagon back to Stanford in a little bit, but Saturday we had quite a number of upsets, as this one was probably the biggest one, in my opinion. Illinois heading up to Happy Valley to take on Penn State, or Rec Hall, which is the gymnasium that Penn State hosts at. And Illinois knocked off Penn State in 4 sets. Penn State took the first set, and then Illinois took the next 3 sets. Though the next 3 sets were rather close. The first set wasn't like a blowout, but Penn State won that 25-20. And then the next 3, they were won by 3 or less points. So for Illinois, it was rather impressive that they pulled off the win. They were led by Raina Terry, who had 17 kills. She hit .273. Megan Cooney had 14 kills and only 2 hitting errors. And Kennedy Collins had 11 kills. In terms of Penn State, they were led by Johnny Parker, who had 23 kills, and she hit 383. Caitlin Horde added 16 kills, and she hit 625, which is very impressive. And then Erica Pritchard chipped in 10 kills. In terms of overall stats, Illinois got pretty much outdone in almost every stat, except for service aces. They had 8 of those compared to Penn State's 5. 4 of those actually came from Kylie Bruder. And then in terms of blocks, Illinois had 9 blocks as a team compared to Penn State's 7, which isn't too big of a difference. Penn State had double the missed serves that Illinois had. And despite Penn State hitting 327, Illinois countered with a solid 299 hitting percentage. So all in all for Illinois, they needed a statement win, and I think they got it. And funny thing is that Adam Karnick, the host of Chi-Town Weekly, said via the Chi-Town Weekly account, Penn State is starting to get tired of seeing Illinois. And he was referencing Penn State losing to Illinois in football, which is pretty funny. So all in all for Illinois, this was a huge win, and you'll see why. You'll see. And then elsewhere in the Big Ten, we had Minnesota downing Nebraska in 5 sets at the Maturi Pavilion in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So, fortunately, Minnesota had something to be happy about over the weekend other than the Vikings losing. Or despite the Vikings losing. Anyway, Nebraska had 5 players in double digits in terms of kills, as they had quite the distribution in terms of kills, and that was quite impressive. And Lexi Sun even got back into the fray, which was always good to see. Minnesota had 3 players in double digits in terms of kills, and they actually gave Stephanie Samity some help. It wasn't just Stephanie Samity carrying the team. Jenna Weenus added 22 kills. She hit 254, which isn't bad. Samity had 20 kills, and Ari Mayabi had 10 kills, which is quite nice. As for Nebraska, they were led by Maddie Kubik, who had 15 kills. Lauren Stivrins, Lexi Sun, and Lindsay Krause each had 12 kills, which is quite impressive. And Kayla Kafee added 11 kills. Now, Nebraska was coming off of a 3-set loss to Wisconsin earlier in the week. They actually got swept by Wisconsin at home in Lincoln, Nebraska, which was quite surprising. So Nebraska went from top of the heap in the Big Ten to slipping down to second place. And I thought Nebraska was going to be a little bit better. I did not think they would get swept on their home floor. And in this match, there was quite a good number of stats for both teams. Minnesota outdug Nebraska 107-97. Keep in mind this was a 5-set match, and the numbers were obviously going to be relatively high. Minnesota had 3 players crack 20-plus digs, while Nebraska had two players crack 20-plus digs, and they also had 5 players reach 10 digs or more on the night. Minnesota had 4 players crack double digits in kills, and Jenna Weenus almost had a 20-20 game where she had 20 digs and 20 kills. Unfortunately, she had 19 digs, so she was 1 short, but it is what it is. Nebraska missed way more serves than Minnesota, as Nebraska missed 12 serves compared to Minnesota's 4, and Minnesota had 8 aces compared to Nebraska's 5. Some of the sets were very close, actually, minus the 5th set. The first set, Minnesota won 25-22. The second set, Nebraska barely won that 30-28. They needed to come from behind in order to win that second set. The third set, Minnesota won 25-21, and then the fourth set, Nebraska won at 25-23. And then set 5, there were no lead changes, but Minnesota led the way, even though it was tied 8 times, as Minnesota won that 5th set 15-9. So I imagine it was like 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, 4-4, 5-5, 6-6, 7-7, 8-8, and then after 8-8, Minnesota basically just turned on the Jets. As a team, Minnesota hit 168, But that wasn't the impressive part. They held Nebraska to only a 135 hitting percentage, which is quite good. So good for Minnesota. They're starting to come along nicely. As for Nebraska, they still got a lot to learn, and they got to work a little bit harder as they're going to have to realize that there are a lot of tough teams in the Big Ten. And case in point, Wisconsin actually learned that the hard way on Halloween afternoon as Purdue, the number 12 Purdue, the same Purdue that lost to Michigan State last week, upset number 3 Wisconsin at Holloway Gym. So that was an impressive victory for Purdue. They needed a bounce-back win after the atrocity they put forth against Michigan State. Purdue was led by the two-headed monster Caitlin Newton and Grace Cleveland, who had 17 kills and 15 kills, respectively. Cleveland hit 300, and Jael Johnson and Emma Ellis each had 8 kills. Wisconsin, on the other hand, had a balanced effort as Grace Loberg led the team in kills with 15. Jade Demps added 13 kills. Julia Orzel added 11 kills. Devin Robinson had 10 kills. And this was kind of the surprising thing. Dana Retke only had 9 kills. Now, I don't know if she was battling injury. It didn't look like she was battling injury. Or maybe Purdue had the game plan of trying to shut down Dana Retke, and then Kelly Sheffield wanted to go to some of the other hitters to make them rethink their strategy. Either way, it was rather surprising to see Wisconsin having such a great win on the road against Nebraska and then just belly flopping against Purdue. But it is tough to win in Holloway Gymnasium. So with Wisconsin losing, they and Nebraska are now tied for the lead in the Big Ten Conference. Wisconsin just has the tiebreaker, so currently Wisconsin is ahead, but right behind them is Nebraska. So that Big Ten race is getting really tight, and even some of the other teams could win, like Minnesota or Ohio State. You can't sleep on OHIO, as Wisconsin, they too have a lot to learn, and they also have to work a little bit harder because, well, the set scores in this matchup were really surprising. The first set, Purdue won 25-20, but Wisconsin got stomped on. It got to the point where they got doubled up, and honestly, I didn't think that Wisconsin was going to come out that sluggish. The second set was a little closer, but Purdue eventually won at 25-22. The third set, Wisconsin finally woke up and won it 25-20, and then the fourth set was the closest, where Purdue had to win it 28-26. So, all in all for Purdue, I think they proved that they are still for real. I think their losses against Michigan State and Nebraska don't do it any justice, just because the Big Ten is basically any given night where anyone can win. And I think for Wisconsin, they're just going to have to be a little bit more cautious, and maybe they got to get Dana Retke more swings, because she only had 19 attempts, but who knows? Wisconsin is basically balancing it out, which is quite impressive, and I think for Wisconsin, in order to be successful, they have to mix it up a bit. They can't just go to Dana Retke, otherwise it's basically a one-trick pony, But Wisconsin is still in good shape. I basically said via the set point account, everyone's got to realize the sun will come up tomorrow, and also that at least Wisconsin is tied for Nebraska. Because I like the message they gave on their Twitter account. Let me pull up the tweet real quick, as it was pretty funny. I'm not going to lie. And I basically had to step in and basically say what I needed to be said. And this is my opinion, and if anyone has a problem, then you could find me at the court. Anyway, the Wisconsin volleyball account posted the final score, and they said, we know, the world is telling us to stop with Halloween. You gotta give it up to the Big Ten, though. This was a good match. Please don't make moderating difficult for us tonight. In other words, don't be disrespectful, otherwise we're going to have to block you. I basically said the sun will come up tomorrow. Everyone just needs to remember that. Also, at least Wisconsin is still in first place, albeit a tie. It could be much worse. And it's actually the truth. Like, with how difficult the Big Ten is, they should be fortunate that they are still in first place. Because if Nebraska had beaten Minnesota, they would still be in first place. So, I don't think people need to be getting their undies in a bunch, especially with how Wisconsin is playing in one of the most competitive conferences in the nation. And then I also said the Big Ten and Pac-12 race is starting to become a fight to the finish. And I really think it is. It really, 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 really is. So, all in all, I think Wisconsin fans don't need to hit the panic button. I don't think Big Ten fans need to hit the panic button. So, everyone just needs to chill the frick out. Now, jumping back to the Pac-12, we had another upset, as this one featured Stanford again, except they lost to Arizona State. Now, Arizona State is actually coming along quite nicely. At one point, they were 1-6 in the conference, and it was all doom and gloom for them. But now they've won 5 in a row, and that is what's making the Sun Devils really interesting. Yes, once again, Stanford did not have Alex Lugier, Kendall Kipp, and Cammie Minor, but to me, I think this was quite the impressive win for Arizona State, albeit it was in Arizona, but you have to win on the road, and you have to win on the road eventually when it comes to the NCAA tournament. No excuses. And every tournament has to deal with that, when it comes to the world of volleyball. As Arizona State was led by Iman Isanovich, as she had 19 kills, Jelly Sear had 12 kills, and Claire Jeter added 10 kills. As for Stanford, they were led by Katie Baird, who had 20 kills. Ilana Ogalive had 15 kills, which I'm surprised she played outside hitter when her natural position is libero, but I digress. Sammy Francis added 9 kills as well, as they actually shifted Natalie Birdie to back row. So she is basically playing defensive specialist. But you got to do what you got to do. You got to cross your T's and dot your I's and not make any excuses. As basically Stanford ran into a hotter Arizona State team. And I think Arizona State is probably the most dangerous team in the Pac-12. It's crazy for me to say that, but Arizona State is the hottest team as of right now, and that is a team no one wants to face. Not even some of the more top-tier teams like Washington. Speaking of Washington, they actually played UCLA and got toppled, as Washington was ranked 8th in the nation, whilst UCLA was ranked 16th. And UCLA put the beat... Oh, they didn't... I wouldn't say it was a beatdown. The second set was a beatdown, but the first and the third set wasn't too terrible. The first set was more closer than the third set, however, as it was the only time Washington actually led in that set. Other than that, it was only an hour and 22 minutes, which was quite nice for the fans that have to battle parking. Anyway, UCLA wound up winning in straight sets, and with that win, UCLA takes over first place in the Pac-12, which is quite nice. Mac May led the way with 18 kills, only 4 hitting errors, as she had a hitting percentage of .424, which was quite nice. Charity Looper continues her amazing freshman season, as she had 13 kills. And then Anna Dodson chipped in 5 kills in the middle as well. And then Washington was led by Claire Hoffman and Sam Drexel, who each had 10 kills. But the main story for Washington was they were held to only 118 in terms of a hitting percentage. And UCLA didn't even play its best game. UCLA did hit .330, but they missed 8 serves, and they only had 2 aces. But they did everything practically better. UCLA had 31 digs compared to Washington's 22. They outblocked them as a team 9-6. And once again, they made fewer errors than UCLA or than Washington altogether. As all in all, I just think that this was the biggest match of the year for UCLA, and whoever won this was going to take over first place in the conference. So UCLA had a lot to prove, especially since the first time UCLA lost a 2-0 lead. And I saw that they had a 2-0 lead, and I'm like, okay, UCLA, you got a 2-0 lead. Let's see how you hold it. because the first time Washington actually reverse swept UCLA, which was rather surprising. But at the same time, Washington is a good home team, and also they were a good team overall. The funny thing about UCLA is that they actually went 5 sets on Friday, or this past Friday, against Washington State, as they had to have McMay pretty much carry the way, as she had 22 kills, but she had 10 hitting errors. Charity Looper added 21 kills. She only had 4 hitting errors, which was great because with the amount of errors that McMay had, they kind of needed someone else to step up. Elon McCall also chipped in 12 kills, and she didn't have any hitting errors, which is quite impressive. Washington State was led by Pia Timmer, who had 22 kills. Magda Jelarova chipped in 13 kills, and then Kalia Williams added 9 kills. As a team, UCLA hit 346, and that is not good if you're Washington State. Like, you gotta be better than... You cannot let UCLA have a higher hitting percentage. Like, I know UCLA is a very athletic team, but they cannot, and I repeat, they cannot have that high of a hitting percentage. Washington State only hit 223, which is quite surprising, and all in all, for the Bruins, I just think they had a lot to prove, and they were down 2-1 in the match, and then they dominated the 4th set, and then eventually wound up winning the 5th set with not too much problems. I still was surprised that Washington State was able to push UCLA to 5, but then Washington just put up a goose egg against them. The good thing for Washington State is that they were able to defeat USC on Sunday, and unfortunately for USC fans, it meant another heartbreaking loss as Washington State did all that they could, or USC did all that they could against Washington State, but it was to no avail. And then USC also lost to Washington on Friday as well. So time's kind of running down when it comes to USC and pulling off a big win. We'll see what happens, though. And then circling the wagons back to last Wednesday, Wisconsin dominated Nebraska, like I said, handing them their first Big Ten loss. Wisconsin was led by Anna Smrek, the 6'9" player, as she was quite incredible. She had 12 kills, while Dana Retke, the 6'8" middle, had 11 kills. All in all, for Wisconsin, it was a much better night, despite them hitting only 229. Like, if this was the night to come up big, that was indeed the night. Or if there was any night they were supposed to come up big, that was indeed the night. As on the road, in a packed house, against a raucous crowd, Wisconsin had a lot to prove, and they needed to prove everybody that they are still the front runners in the Big Ten Conference. So, all in all, for Wisconsin, they proved themselves, and it was a great job. I think everyone thought that Wisconsin and Nebraska was going to go at least 4. Even I thought it was going to go at least 4, but Wisconsin put forth a great effort, and they got the win this past Wednesday. However, I was rather surprised. I still couldn't get why Wisconsin had such a sluggish start and an eventual sloppy finish against Purdue. Again, maybe it's just you can't put together 2 impressive road wins in the same week, but I don't know. Either way, Wisconsin still has a lot to learn, and I think they are talented, and I think they have what it takes. It's just that they are going to need to put forth the full effort the rest of the way. As for Nebraska, they did not have one player in double digits in terms of kills, but they did have a balanced effort as Lindsey Krause, Maddie Kubik, and Lawrence Difference each had 9 kills. Kayla Cafey added 8 kills. And we only got to see Lexi Sun play in 1 set, which is unfortunate. But, hey, at least John Cook was able to utilize her against Minnesota. So, all in all for the Big Ten race, it's getting rather tight. And I'm rather fascinated to see what the race will end up being like come the end of November or toward the end of November. Because, to me, I think the Big Ten is probably now in the mix of the most dramatic race in all of the Power 5 conferences. Because UCLA currently leads the Pac-12 with Washington right on their coattails. As for the Big Ten, you currently have Nebraska and Wisconsin tied for first place, and there's not one team that sucks in that conference. Even the lowly teams in the conference can possibly pull out a win. Look at what Michigan State did last week. Iowa and Rutgers are obviously having seasons to forget, but you can't really sleep on them. Maryland and Michigan are trying to continue their winning ways. Like, Michigan is still receiving votes, while Maryland had themselves an impressive non-conference schedule. They're kind of still trying to find their footing in the Big Ten. And then you look at the 8 and 4 teams, Ohio State, Purdue, Illinois, and Penn State. Those teams still have a shot at winning the conference. And then Minnesota is 9 and 3. That team is still right on the coattails of Wisconsin and Nebraska. And those two basically are the occupants of the top spots in the Big Ten. So for the Big Ten, I think it's going to be a great race, and it's going to be a great fight to the finish going forward. It's basically going to be whichever teams make the fewest mistakes and whichever teams can beat the teams they're supposed to beat. It's kind of like the MLB and their finishes of who will get the wild card spot, who will get the top spot in the certain divisions, and who will get the number 1 seed and whatnot. So all in all, that's kind of my little spiel on the Big Ten. And then same can be said for the Pac-12. There's still no clear-cut winner just yet, because everyone is beating up on everybody. And again, Arizona State is a sleeper team that could play spoiler to everybody. But now that certain teams are starting to get hot from certain other matches, I think that this conference, all the conference races are going to be one to make note of. And the only other Power 5 conferences there are the ACC, which has Louisville leading, the SEC, which has Kentucky leading, and then the Big 12, which has Texas leading. But Texas has a big test on Friday and Saturday. And then as for Louisville, they'll eventually get their second go-around against Georgia Tech and Pitt. Now, as for Kentucky actually beat Tennessee last Wednesday, the same night that Wisconsin swept Nebraska. And honestly, I was quite impressed with Kentucky, as they actually did not have one of their top players playing in Maddie Skinner. She was out due to a non-COVID illness. So that was already advantage for Tennessee. And then also Kentucky was playing on the road. So all in all for Kentucky, they were at a disadvantage, but they swept Tennessee. I'm not kidding you. And they just straight up dominated them. I was very surprised to see how average Tennessee was. They did not really have control of the match, as Kentucky just straight up dominated them. I expected at least 4 sets from Tennessee and Kentucky. And with this win, I pretty much don't think there's any team that could stop Kentucky. Because if you look at Kentucky's schedule, Kentucky's remaining schedule when it comes to the rest of their conference schedule, there's not too many teams that can really take them down. I mean, this week they have South Carolina, which could be a sneaky good matchup, but South Carolina's kind of come crashing down back to earth. Georgia, I don't think they'll be able to have too many problems against. Texas A&M, they're still up and down, but I think Kentucky has that in the bag. At Auburn, obviously, Auburn's not the greatest team. And then their only true tough matchup is Florida, but they'll get Florida at home both times in the final week of the season. And I think that's going to be a great matchup. Now, what does this mean going forward for the rest of the conference? I think it means that they're going to have to be battling for second place, because unless, of course, we get upsets from South Carolina and Texas A&M and then Florida, it just means that no one's going to be able to touch Kentucky, and more importantly, that Kentucky is just that darn good. Everyone thought this was going to be a rebuild year. Everyone thought that they weren't going to be able to match last year's team. Obviously, losing Avery Skinner and Madison Lilly and Gabby Curry was tough, but they've been able to fill in some new roles, and they've also been able to have other players and returning players fill in for them and also put in the work that last year's team did just as much as this year's team did. So all in all for Kentucky, they're still here. Like, they're not going anywhere in the SEC, and unless, of course, they suffer a collapse, I don't think no one's going to catch up to them. The only way Kentucky loses the SEC lead is if they wind up losing to opponents they're not supposed to really lose to. And the only team closest to Kentucky is Mississippi State and Florida. And Florida is already inconsistent, and Mississippi State isn't really the best, if you ask me. I mean, yes, Mississippi State has some impressive victories this season, but losing to Kentucky didn't help their matters, and then losing to Florida the first go-around didn't help. And then they also got 2 matchups against Tennessee, 2 matchups against Arkansas, which Arkansas could also be a dark horse team to possibly make the NCAA tournament. This also leads me to another question. How many teams do the SEC take, or does the NCAA take from the SEC? Obviously, they take Kentucky, and then I think Tennessee is for sure in. Does Florida get in? Does Florida have the resume to get in? That's the $1 million question right there. If they could beat Kentucky at least once, I think they can. But looking at their resume, they don't really have too many standout-ish wins. They only have their win over Minnesota, which that was early in the season. They lost to Baylor twice. They lost to Florida State, which I thought was disappointing. They lost to Mississippi State. They lost to Stanford, which was 20th at the time. All in all, for Florida, it might just be, it's going to have to be them. If they want to for sure get in or at least improve their seeding, they have to start pulling off some of the big wins. And they also cannot afford to lose to any more teams that could possibly beat them. Because this week, Florida is at home against Tennessee, and Tennessee is probably licking their chops and thinking, you know what? We got to solidify our spot in the NCAA tournament. And then Arkansas on the road, that could be a tough matchup for Florida. Like, Florida probably has the toughest schedule of the remaining SEC teams. Because they got Tennessee, like I said, this week. Next week, they're at Arkansas both times. Wednesday, November 17th, they're home against Auburn. That's probably going to be their only breather match. And then Saturday, they're home against South Carolina, which South Carolina has taken a major dip, but they still aren't to be underestimated. And then lastly, Florida finishes the season at number 5 Kentucky. So all in all for Florida, if they want to make the tournament, they'll have to make sure they run the table for the most part. If anything, their only losses should be against Tennessee and Kentucky, because I think Tennessee can beat Florida this year, or this week. So that's pretty much my spiel on the SEC. And that's basically going to be it for the recap of Week 10 from last week. So now, before we go into the AVCA Top 10, not AVCA Top 10, AVCA Top 25, we had the committee's Top 10 reveal, as they actually revealed the Top 10 on ESPNU, and this was revealed during the UCLA and Washington matchup. I wasn't paying attention to that because I had other things going on, and then I also had Halloween and whatnot, so yeah. So the top 10 teams from the committee, and this was basically from Wednesday, October 27th. So this wasn't updated at all. This was basically what the committee had as the top 10 teams in terms of who was going to be where in terms of the NCAA tournament and whatnot. So the top 10 teams from the committee are number 10, UCLA, number 9, Georgia Tech, number 8, Baylor, number 7, Ohio State, number 6, Nebraska. And for the top 5, number 5 is Kentucky, Number 4 is Pitt. Number 3 is Wisconsin. Keep in mind, this was before Wisconsin lost to Purdue. So, gotta remember that. Don't be saying, oh, why is Wisconsin number 3? You know why. Number 2 is Texas. Very surprised to see Texas, but I have been hearing that Texas hasn't really played a stronger schedule than the number 1 team. And then the number 1 team from the committee is, can we get a drum roll, please? Louisville. So Louisville is the number 1 team when it comes to the committee, which is quite impressive. Louisville has played a tough schedule, and obviously having a high RPI and a conference with an amazing RPI is quite nice. And I think, to me, Louisville is deserving of that number 1 seed. Can they keep it up is the main question. And if they go undefeated, it would be quite nice. And Louisville did pick up a pair of wins last weekend in ACC play. And with those wins, they are currently off to their best start through its certain X amount of matches, as Louisville Louisville in terms of its record, I want to say is like 22-0. I'm just guessing this. This is just my guess when it comes to this. And Louisville's 21-0. I said 22-0, but unfortunately I was wrong. I was off by 1. Shame on me. So, yeah, Louisville is 21-0, and they're still all alone in first place. They're actually 2 games ahead of Pitt and Georgia Tech. And honestly, I don't think that's going to be changing anytime soon. Looking at Louisville's schedule, they have North Carolina remaining, at North Carolina. Well, this week they are at North Carolina State and at North Carolina. Next week they are home against Georgia Tech, and then they are at Notre Dame the following week. And then they have Duke after that. And then, once again, their big-time matchup will be against Pitt, which is going to be at Fitzgerald Fieldhouse in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then they close out the season against Notre Dame, which Notre Dame is still trying to find its footing and possibly finish this season 500. But it's not looking too good for them, as Notre Dame lost to Duke this past weekend in 5 sets. Never thought I'd see the day Notre Dame would lose to Duke. Like, holy crud. Currently, they're 9-12, and Notre Dame's got to needs to basically run the table. They are at home, or they're at North Carolina on Friday, and then Sunday they're at North Carolina State, and then on Friday they are at North Carolina State, and then they have Louisville after that, then Virginia Tech, then Florida State, and they're at Louisville to close out the season, like I just mentioned. So, looking at their remaining schedule, they have 7 matches to go, and they're currently 9-12. In order for them to be in at-large, they have to finish 5-2. That would give them a record of 14-14. And they do have a good RPI because the ACC all around has improved. But that would mean they're at the very least they'd have to only lose to Louisville. Like, they'd have to basically win 5 out of their next 7, which means they'd have to win against North Carolina, which is realistically possible, even though North Carolina is improved. They have to beat North Carolina State, which I think is possible. Virginia Tech is definitely a possible win. And then Florida State is going to be rather tough just because Florida State is really improved, and they also want to make the NCAA tournament. They have a decent resume, but if Notre Dame does pull out that victory and they're at the point where they're 14-13 entering that last match against Louisville, it would not be bad. But for Notre Dame, it's basically win or go home time because they certainly cannot win the ACC. And more importantly, finishing 500 would, or under 500 would take them out of the contention of being an at-large. I mean, I guess there's still the Invitational, the National Volleyball Invitational Tournament, or the NVIT, but those players want to play in the actual postseason. So, all in all, we'll have to see what happens with the Fighting Irish going forward. So, that was a little bit of a tangent from Notre Dame. Now let's jump to the AVCA Top 25 Coaches Poll for this week. So 21 through 25 include Illinois. Illinois is at 25, Creighton at 24, Florida at 23, Tennessee at 22, and Washington State at 21. 20 through 16 include San Diego at 20, Stanford at 19, Oregon at 18, Western Kentucky at 17, and Utah at 16. 15 through 11 includes Penn State at 15, Georgia Tech at 14, UCLA at 13, Washington at 12, and Minnesota at 11. 10 through 6 includes Baylor at 10, Nebraska at 9, Purdue at 8, Ohio State at 7, and BYU at 6. And then 5 through 1 includes Kentucky at 5, Wisconsin at 4 after their loss to Purdue, Pitt at 3, Louisville at 2, and your still number 1 team in the AVCA Coaches Poll is Texas, which they've been number 1 all season, and it's no surprise they're still up there. Anyway, so that is basically your AVCA Top 25 Coaches Polls. Something to note is that Creighton pulled off the 4-set win over Marquette, and honestly, that was a big win for the Blue Jays, considering Creighton has had their troubles against Marquette. It's always been competitive against Marquette, but I think Creighton has found their footing against them, and also they pretty much are in control of a good portion of the Big East Conference. They still have to win the Big East tournament in order to get that automatic entry, but for them, I think they are still the team to be in the Big East Conference. They just have to play consistent the rest of the way. I think it's doable, but they're going to have to possibly not lose along the way because they can't afford any more losses going forward. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. I think Creighton is a great team. I still think they're a possible dark horse team. It's just that they're going to have to watch out for some of the other teams. Like UConn was rather surprising, and then they obviously can't afford to lose to St. John's, and then obviously if they face Marquette down the road, it's going to be a possible big-time matchup as well. As I think, to me, Creighton needs to be careful, and if they want to go deep in the playoffs, they have to keep up their consistency. So we'll see what happens, but I like Creighton as a team. Their coach is good. Kirsten Booth is a phenomenal coach, and I think she knows what her doing. And then Nora Sis has been phenomenal as a freshman for Creighton. And it's not just a one-man band, man. It's a team effort from the Blue Jays. So that's going to basically do it for the AVCA Coaches Polls and basically my final thoughts on the AVCA Coaches Polls. Let's take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, we'll preview the CIF Southern Section Girls Volleyball Division 1 Finals, and then we'll also preview the CIF Southern Section Division 2 Girls Volleyball Finals, as a former Set Point guest has made the finals with his team. So you're not going to want to miss it, and we'll also recap Week 11's matchups, as there are quite a bit of noteworthy matchups on the slate for this weekend. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all of that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' to NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal Sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal Sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Teran Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Live.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That gives you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
And welcome back to the second half of Set Point. You can catch all of our amazing shows right here on iSports Radio. We have many amazing shows such as Fast Break, Reppin' to NorCal Sports, The Show That Never Sleeps, Titletown Sports with Beantown Brandon, as we welcome him into the chat room. He says, "What's up, Teran? Hope you're having a great show." Thank you, Brandon. And yes, he puts Go Patriots. Yes, I know, Go Patriots. But we talking some volleyball today, as the Boston College. I should make note that Boston College is still having a good season. They are vastly improved. They're just having a little tough time in ACC play, but who knows? Maybe they could play spoiler. You never know, because the entire ACC has improved, and Boston College is no exception. Now let's jump on into the second half of the show. So, talk a little high school volleyball here, high school girls volleyball, as I would like to congratulate our former Set Point guest, Craig Pizzanti, on his girls volleyball team advancing to the CIF Southern Section Division II Girls Volleyball Championship, as Huntington Beach swept Palos Verdes in the semifinals. As of right now, Huntington Beach has not lost a set in the playoffs, and they have won a whopping 21 in a row. That is absolute bananas. I can't believe the streak is still alive, and you gotta give it up for the Oilers. Like, if you're me and you know how the Oilers play, they are a very young team. They're actually starting 2 freshmen. They're starting some sophomores and juniors, and then they have a couple seniors that start, which have definitely been the anchor to their great gameplay. But all in all, for Huntington Beach, they are a well-oiled machine, and that's no pun intended, because their mascot name is actually the Oilers, and it's rather funny. So I'm not trying to make puns, but they are indeed a well-oiled machine. And Craig Pizzanti is a fantastic coach, and I think he's got that program headed into the correct direction, as they're actually making their first championship appearance in the Southern Section Championship game since 2009. That year, the Oilers unfortunately lost to Dos Pueblos of Goleta, but this is a different year. That was 12 years ago. This is different now, as the Oilers are a very talented team. Their opponent will be the top seed Aliso Niguel, as the Oilers were actually the 3 seed. And unfortunately, for some reason, they weren't awarded the 2 seed, which I kind of don't understand, just because I thought they were a much better team, and they eventually swept the number 2 seed, which, again, it makes no sense. Like, no, nothing against Palos Verdes, who was the actual number 2 seed, but I thought Huntington Beach was more deserving of it. Huntington Beach won its league. They were the hottest team going in, and more importantly, I think they had a higher ranking. I get some of their body of work wasn't all that great compared to Palos Verdes', but I will also say this: I think Huntington Beach deserves that 2nd seed. And maybe, just maybe, Huntington Beach should have been in the upper division, the highest division. Because at the end of the season, basically, they were left out of the Division I cut, which is sad face, but oh well. So anyway, Huntington Beach will play Aliso Niguel in the finals. Aliso Niguel, in their journey, they actually did not have the easiest journey. The first round, Aliso Niguel beat Long Beach Poly in 4 sets. And then in the second round, Aliso Niguel beat Rancho Cucamonga in 4 sets. And then in the quarterfinals, down 0-2, Aliso Niguel beat Laguna Beach in 5 sets. And then the semifinals, Aliso Niguel beat La Salle of Pasadena in 5 sets as well. So, all in all for Aliso Niguel, they've had themselves quite the eventful run in the postseason. I mean, I picked Huntington Beach to win it all, but I think the Wolverines can definitely put a little scare into the Oilers. But I think Huntington Beach is not only the most talented team of the two, they're the hottest team of the two. And that is the key to winning certain matches, or the key to winning in the postseason. You don't need to have the most talented team, but you need to have the hottest team in the postseason, because it's all about momentum. And momentum is huge, because you cannot go into the postseason having any doubt whatsoever. And my teams have kind of learned this the hard way, whether it's college or high school. All in all, I think it's going to be a fun little CIF Southern Section Division II championship. I want to see the Oilers pull out the victory. Their last championship was in 1996. At the time, I was only 3.5 going on 4. So we'll see what the Oilers could do. I'm most likely going to be attending that match, though there is another championship matchup that's going on as the CIF Southern Section Division I championships are going on, and this features the top 2 teams in the nation. Yes, let me rephrase that. The CIF Southern Section Division I championship features the top 2 teams in the nation, not in the state, in the nation. As that features No.1 Mater Dei, No.1 Marymount and No.2 Mater Dei. It used to be No.1 Mater Dei, the No.2 Marymount, but now things have changed. Anyway, for this matchup, it's going to be played at Miracosta High School, whereas Huntington Beach will be the host school of the Division II championship, because the committee said host sites will be the finals for Divisions 2 through 9, and then Division 1 will be played at Miracosta. I imagine they agreed on Miracosta due to the fact that Miracosta's gymnasium looks like a freaking college gymnasium. And for those that are wondering where Miracosta is, it's in Manhattan Beach. So there was a lot of money invested into it, as always, as I think it was over $1 million worth of a refurbishment and a remodel. So all in all, it's a really good gym. And like I said on the 2-year anniversary special, I think Miracosta High School has the most amazing gym in terms of boys and girls high school volleyball. But that's in California. But all in all, for the 2 matchups, or for the matchup against Marymount and Mater Dei, it's going to be a very great matchup. The 2 have already met, as Mater Dei lost to Marymount in 2 sets, as they actually got hammered by Marymount, and this took place in the Durango tournament in Nevada. And all in all, for Mater Dei, they may have their work cut out for them against Marymount, but I think it's still doable that they can win. But Marymount has not lost a matchup. They're 30-0, and this is a unique fun fact that I actually learned this past Saturday. Marymount has not lost the first set in any match they've played. It's quite amusing. And then I also heard that Marymount has not lost they've only lost 5 sets on the year, which is quite amazing. And honestly, I think this is going to be a very good matchup. I don't want to guarantee anything. I know I picked Mater Dei when it came to winning the championship, but I think this is going to be a tough little outing for the Monarchs. I think Marymount is a good team, and it's going to be one tough matchup for the Monarchs to win. As I will also say this about Marymount, they've dropped 6 sets all season long. One was to Hamilton in Arizona, one was to Vista Marietta, one was to Alemany. One was to Harvard Westlake, one was to Vista Marietta, and one was to Redondo Union. So, all in all, this is turning out to being a uphill climb for Mater Dei, but anything is possible. It's at a neutral site. There's not going to be a home court advantage, and all in all, these are the 2 best teams in the nation, and anything is possible. Something I would like to note is that when it comes to undefeated teams, not only when it comes to like volleyball, but in like other certain sports, like let's say Gonzaga and NCAA women's volleyball, undefeated teams have seen their season come to an end in the postseason. Because you look at what happened with Gonzaga. They were undefeated going into the championship game against Baylor, and then they wound up losing in the championship match in big-time fashion. Then you look at Wisconsin, which was the number 1 seed, and they wound up losing in the semifinals to number 4 Texas. And then you also have Loyola High School in terms of boys volleyball, as they were undefeated in the playoffs, and then they lost in the semifinals. And this was in boys volleyball, mind you. And believe it or not, Loyola is actually the boys volleyball equivalent to Marymount. And the reason, if you know that, it's because Loyola and then Marymount, both of those schools are located in Los Angeles. And you want to know what else is located in Los Angeles? The University of Loyola Marymount, which is basically a college. So, yeah. That's kind of your Snapple fun fact. Loyola High School and Marymount High School got their school name from Loyola Marymount, the university in Los Angeles. So, all in all, I am expecting a great matchup right there. I wish that final did not fall on the day that Huntington Beach played, and I wish the game wasn't at Miracosta. I wish all finals were at neutral sites. I just hate that this has to be, but it is what it is, and we have to adapt due to these COVID times. So, there's that. So that's basically going to do it for high school volleyball talk. Now let's jump on into the remainder of the NCAA women's volleyball portion of this show, as we have Week 11's NCAA women's volleyball matchups to watch for. There's actually quite a bit on certain days. So we'll start off with Wednesday, where number 22 Tennessee takes on number 23 Florida. This is a kind of a must-win for Florida if they want to stay alive in the SEC race, and then Tennessee, if they want to improve their chances of making the NCAA tournament as an at-large, even though I think they're in, I think they're going to need to win this one. It's at Florida, so it's a big test, so it's going to be a tough matchup for the Lady Vols, but I think they can do it. I think Florida has been inconsistent this season, and I don't think they are good enough to take down Tennessee. It's nothing against the Florida roster. I just think this Tennessee team is absolutely different because Florida, they haven't really fared well against talented teams, especially ranked. Like, I want to say their record when it comes to ranked teams this season is like 1-4. So, all in all, for Florida, I think their work's cut out for them despite them being the home team. I think Tennessee is going to come in thinking, okay, we are the favorite to win, but we can't underestimate Florida. So a lot is on the line for both these teams. I think Tennessee basically punches its ticket into the NCAA tournament as an at-large if they can get the win, but they cannot play like they did against Florida or against Kentucky. Like, that was atrocious right there. That right there was atrocious. Then we jump over to Thursday. We have some Big Ten action as number 11 Minnesota hits the road to Columbus to take on number 7 Ohio State. So this is actually the second meeting between these two teams as Minnesota won the first meeting. Minnesota is coming along as of late, and they are still in the hunt for that Big Ten championship. Ohio State, however, might have something to say about that, and I think for Ohio State, they're going to have to prove that they are a top 10 team. I'm not saying they are unworthy of the top 10 status, but they haven't really, proved it yet. They seem to always have wins over certain teams, but they don't really have then they always seem to back it up with a loss, which is kind of unacceptable, but I think to me, this would be a big win for Ohio State. I know they took down Purdue, but it shouldn't take them getting beaten down the first go-around to then beat Purdue the second go-around. And then if Ohio State wants to win the Big Ten, they're going to have to actually beat the teams they're supposed to beat. Not that I'm saying Minnesota is not good. I think Minnesota is a very talented team. I think Ohio State has a lot of talent on their team, and on paper they look good, but they have to prove it against a much more tougher and bigger opponent. And Minnesota does have a lot of great options. They're not just putting it all on Stephanie Samity. They're also getting Jenna Weenus in the offensive mix, and all in all for Minnesota, I think they're still the greatest defensive team I've seen. They will dig the ball every now and then, and those dig numbers will be high, and the blocking numbers will also be high. So I think for Ohio State, they're going to have to be careful. It cannot just be the Emily Landot show. It's going to have to be an all-around group effort if they want to defeat Minnesota. That's that matchup. The second matchup on this Thursday, November 4th, is number 18 Oregon at number 19 Stanford. I still think this is a noteworthy matchup due to the fact that Stanford could try to possibly salvage a win over a ranked team, but we don't know the whereabouts of what's happening with the three players that are currently out due to injury. Now, Oregon, on the other hand, they had to basically outlast Colorado in 5 sets this past Sunday, as they had themselves a little bit of trouble against them, but they were able to ultimately pull it off as Oregon. They're still in the thick of the Pac-10 race, and I think they definitely still have a chance to win the Pac-12. They're 7-5, but it's still doable for them to win. I mean, they'll need a lot of help, but I still think they're a lock for the NCAA tournament. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. And I also failed to make note of in my recaps, Utah beat Oregon this past week as Utah really let Oregon have it. I was quite surprised to see them actually getting stomped on. I thought they were gonna be better than that, but all in all, for Oregon, they still have a lot to learn, and they're going to have to work a little bit harder if they want to find success in the Pac-12, because they're still in the Pac-12 title race, but their chances look slimmer and slimmer, especially with how hot UCLA is. So for Oregon, they have Stanford, and this will be a big-time matchup for the Cardinal, as they'll also try to look to get back on track. I think it's doable, but it's going to be a lot tougher without their star players. So there's that. So that's all the Thursday matchups for this week. For Friday, we have this is the big matchup of the week, by the way. This is number 1 Texas at number 10 Baylor. So this is basically the battle for the Big 12 title. Number 1 Texas has a vice grip on the conference, and basically if they win, then it's basically GG to the rest of the conference. If Baylor manages to win one game, then the next game will be even crucial for the following day, as both matches against Texas for Baylor will be played at Waco, aka Baylor. So for Baylor, this is basically their last-ditch effort to possibly win the division, or not win the division, win the conference. I think Baylor is a talented team, but against number 1 Texas, they're not quite there yet. I think number 1 Texas, well, they won't sweep them, but I think they'll at least make a statement to everybody saying that we are the number 1 team in the nation. Don't you forget about that. We're not going anywhere. And hopefully for Baylor, they can give Texas a good battle. I think for me, the number 1 thing for Texas is they have to limit Avery Skinner and Yassiana Presley. And also watch for the middles on Baylor as well. They've got some good middles and their setter's good. So all in all for Texas, as long as they cross their T's and dot their I's, they should be fine going into this matchup. Like, they have a lot of talent on their team, and the same can be said for Baylor, but Texas has just had a leg up on everybody, especially Baylor. And for Baylor, this is kind of must-win territory, and both matches are theoretically must-wins, considering Baylor, if we all remember, had that 5-set loss to Texas Tech, which was absolutely atrocious on their part. I still can't believe Baylor lost that. They had a 2-0 lead, and then they wound up losing, I repeat, losing to Texas Tech via a reverse sweep. So back to the Pac-12, another noteworthy matchup to watch out for, and this is kind of a honorable mention, is Arizona State at number 12 Washington. Now, like I said earlier, Arizona State is one of the more hotter teams in the conference and in the nation, as they have 5 straight wins, and then 3 of their 5 wins have come against ranked teams. So for the Sun Devils, a win over Washington would be huge, as that could basically make them the case to possibly make the tournament as an at-large team. So all in all, for Arizona State, they'll have to pull out all the stops because they are playing in Washington. But I think for Arizona State, they have momentum on their side. Washington is coming off of a drubbing loss to UCLA. Their Pac-12 hopes are basically in the hands of this match and the remainder of their matches going forward. If Washington wants to win the Pac-12, they may have to run the table, and they'll also need to get some help along the way against certain other teams that UCLA takes on. Regardless, I think it's going to be a great matchup between the Sun Devils and the Huskies, and I think for Arizona State, they will have to bring their best, because if not, then they will get swept. Heading over to the ACC, we have Miami at number 14, Georgia Tech. Now, Georgia Tech is obviously having an amazing season. They have that win over Pitt. They also have some other solid wins. And they're still in the hunt for the ACC crown. It's just that they're a little bit further behind Louisville, as they along with Pitt are tied for second place. Miami, on the other hand, is having an outstanding season. They are one of the more improved teams in the ACC. I talked about how the ACC as a whole has improved, and nothing against Boston College, but I think Miami is the most improved team in the conference, and they are making a case to possibly make the NCAA tournament. As for the Hurricanes, they're going to need to play their best game. This is kind of an inner... It's not like an it's an inter-region matchup. That's what I'm getting at. It's not like an interstate battle. It's an inter-region battle because Georgia and Florida are basically in the South. So all in all, for Miami, they're going to have to play their best volleyball against the Yellow Jackets. I think the Canes can do it, but if they want to have a higher chance of making the tournament, and if they want to make a statement to possibly 100% being in the tournament and not basically being the last 4 teams in, they will need a win like this over Georgia Tech. I think it's doable, but all in all, it's not going to be the easiest thing because Georgia Tech has some hitters. They have Mariana Brambilla, they have Julia Bergman, Maddie McKissock has done an outstanding job at the setter position. And all in all, for Georgia Tech, they have a really wise head coach, and I think it's going to be tough for Miami. But that being said, Miami knows this is crunch time, and November is basically the time where you have to pull out the victories if you want to make a case to be in the NCAA tournament or if you want to improve your seeding. So Miami is receiving votes, which is a good thing, but they cannot, I repeat, cannot afford to drop too many matches along the way toward the end of the season. Heading over to the Big Ten, we have receiving votes Michigan at number 15 Penn State. So Michigan did not have the best week last week as they take on Penn State. Now, for Michigan, they're kind of in the same boat as Miami. They have been solid all season long, albeit they had themselves an up and down preseason, as Michigan will try to pull out the win against Penn State. Michigan does have some talented players. They return all of their players, which were mainly sophomores and then a few juniors as well. But all in all, for Michigan, they will really have to play their best if they want to take down Penn State. If there's any hope for Michigan, it's that if Illinois could win at Penn State, so can Michigan. I can see Michigan possibly making the tournament, but it's going to be rather close. They're going to have to be there's for sure going to be an at-large team, and they could be the last four teams in. But I think that's going to be a talented last four team in, as Michigan does have talent. Like I said, they returned so many of their talented players. It's just that they're going to have to pull out all the stops against the Nittany Lions. Especially since they're in like the middle of the Big Ten and Penn State is still in the thick of the the Big Ten race. And if Penn State still wants to keep that Big Ten title hope alive, they're going to have to pretty much run the table. So we'll have to see what happens with them going forward. But for Michigan, it'll be a great matchup against Penn State. I just think Penn State, coming off of a loss to Illinois, they're going to want to possibly get back on track. Back to the Pac-12, we have number 13 UCLA at number 19 Utah. This is another big-time matchup for the Pac-12, as UCLA is 2 games ahead of Utah. And if Utah wants to win the Pac-12, then they're going to have to win this big-time matchup. And they're going to have to win certain other matchups as well, as Utah, like I said, they're 2 games behind UCLA, and everyone's chasing UCLA now, as this is no longer the multiple horse race. This is a 1-horse race for the time being, unless UCLA falls. And UCLA knows they can't get too fat and lazy off of their win over Washington. They still have plenty of matchups to go, and probably the biggest trap matchup for UCLA is their final matchup of the season against USC. I know UCLA fans don't want to hear that, because I think between you and me, listeners out there, I think UCLA is miles better than USC when it comes to women's volleyball. But I think for UCLA, they don't have too many guaranteed wins, because you look at the remaining schedule for UCLA, it's rather brutal. They have Friday's matchup against Utah, then Saturday's matchup against Colorado, and they've got Oregon next week, and then the following week they are home against Arizona State. It'll all depend on how Arizona State does, and that'll be a grudge match for UCLA as they lost to Arizona State. They will get a couple of, I won't say freebies, but a couple of good matchups that they should win against, as they'll get Arizona and Cal, and then they close off the season against USC, which I can see them winning. I can see UCLA winning, but it seems like when they play at the Galen Center, that winds up being their house of horrors. So we'll see if UCLA can run the table and get a majority of those wins that they have on their schedule. Closing off Friday's matchups is going back to the Big Ten. We have number 8 Purdue at Maryland. Maryland is also in the middle of the pack when it comes to the Big Ten. Purdue is also in the hunt for the Big Ten Conference Championship. But if Purdue wants to win the Big Ten, they have to pretty much run the table. They did a good job of winning last week as they took down Northwestern earlier in the week last week. And then they beat Wisconsin, number 3 Wisconsin, or then number 3 Wisconsin, at home in 4 sets yesterday. So I think Purdue is just as real as most people are giving them credit for. I just think the previous week did not do them any justice because they lost to a not-so-good Michigan State team, and then they were reeling coming off that loss as they took on a very tough Nebraska team, which had a lot to prove. And I think, to me, Purdue is still up there. Do I think they are a top 8 team that deserves a seed or to host a NCAA tournament game? That still remains to be seen. But honestly, I think that Purdue is still up there and they're not to be slept on. And more importantly, if they're doing the traditional 64-team tournament and they're also doing the top 16 teams host, then that gives Purdue a little bit more wiggle room in terms of possibly hosting a tournament. As even if they somehow lose a few games to like some non-guaranteed opponents, I still think they have a good shot at winning a chance at hosting an NCAA tournament game. So there's that. So then on Saturday, we jump to Saturday's matchups. We have number 1 Texas at number 10 Baylor. That's basically, I'll reiterate the first go around. It's the matchup of the weekend, and depending on what happens, the first matchup could basically be the fate of Baylor in the second go around. I think Baylor has a shot against Texas, but honestly, I think Texas is just too much. I will eat my crow if Texas somehow loses to Baylor, but I'm 100% confident in Texas. Now, another matchup I found intriguing this weekend, and this is going to be a shout-out to my buddy Daniel Gilman, the host of 6 Rotations, along with Mick Haley, is Cal Poly at UC Santa Barbara. Now, Cal Poly has not really had the greatest season in the Big West Conference. And the Big West Conference isn't necessarily the greatest conference like it was 2 seasons ago when they took Santa Barbara, Cal Poly, and Hawaii in the same year. For this matchup, however, Cal Poly, if they want to have any sort of hope of making the NCAA tournament, or if they want to have any sort of hope of making or of winning the Big West Conference, they need to beat UC Santa Barbara because it's looking really doubtful when it comes to them winning the Big West Conference. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I think that Cal Poly does have a talented team and they're still a possible threat to the conference, but their conference record is 8-0 and they are currently 10-13. The 10-13 record is very misguiding just because Cal Poly has played some very stiff competition this season. And same can be said for UC Santa Barbara, as their non-conference schedule was very brutal. And then Big West Conference play was a whole lot better, as UC Santa Barbara is currently tied for first place in the Big West Conference with Hawaii. And you're never going to believe who UC Santa Barbara faces in their final game of the season. If you guessed Hawaii, you are correct. I didn't give people a whole lot of time, but you know what I mean. All in all, for UC Santa Barbara, this is a very important matchup for the Gauchos. They have to beat the Mustangs. They beat them the first time around at Cal Poly, but winning at Santa Barbara, they have to do so. Like, looking at Santa Barbara's schedule, they have some favorable matchups. I think they have some matchups they could win in convincing fashion. You have to start off with their Friday matchup against Bakersfield. Now, Bakersfield has been the up-and-down team of the conference. Yes, they're a newcomer of the conference, but I think Bakersfield is kind of the team that could possibly play spoiler. And same can be said for Cal Poly, too. So this is a big week for the Gauchos as they play Bakersfield Friday and Cal Poly Saturday. I just think that their matchup against Cal Poly is a much bigger matchup just because it has a lot of magnitude for the Mustangs as well as the Gauchos. Just because the Gauchos are currently the leaders of the Big West, but once again, Cal Poly could play spoiler. But looking at the remaining schedule for the Gauchos, they have Bakersfield Friday, Cal Poly Saturday. Then next week they have Cal State Fullerton on next Friday, and then next Saturday, which is a match that I plan to go to, there is UC Santa Barbara at Long Beach State. Now, the Gauchos could have a tough time against Long Beach State, just because Long Beach State always gives UC Santa Barbara their worst matchup at the Pyramid. It's very, very confusing. I don't know how UC Santa Barbara always struggles when they play at Long Beach, but it's a mystery that I'll never figure out. And then also another matchup to note when it comes to UC Santa Barbara going forward is their matchup against UC Davis. Why is that a noteworthy matchup? Just because Davis actually beat UC Santa Barbara the first go-around. So if UC Santa Barbara wants to have any hope of winning the conference, they have to, and I repeat, they have to win out, and they basically have to see what happens with Hawaii going forward. Because after Davis, they have CSUN, which is most likely a win. And then, like I said, the Gauchos closed out the season against Hawaii. That's always a tough place to play, and I did not know this. Hawaii is now allowing fans back in the stands, and that's going to make it even more tougher for UC Santa Barbara to win. But that being said, I think they could take down Cal Poly. I'm certain they could do so at the Thunderdome. They just cannot underestimate the Mustangs, just because the most dangerous team in the conference is a team that has not a whole lot to play for. And while the Mustangs still have some postseason ambitions or a Big West Conference championship, albeit a long shot to winning the conference, I think the Mustangs are still up there because they face some stiff competition, and also they have the potential to taking down UC Santa Barbara. So I went on a big-time tangent on that matchup. So my apologies to everybody. But heading over to Sunday, I'm going to get this matchup out of the way. Michigan at Maryland is probably the best unranked matchup of the weekend. Now, again, Michigan and Maryland are both in the middle of the Big Ten. They both have possibilities to win or to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large, but they're going to have to do so by either beating one another or by possibly winning out the rest of the way, or not winning out the rest of the way, just winning matchups that they should win against. For Michigan, they are receiving votes, and hence the word if, they win against a team a la Penn State or a la Wisconsin or whoever they face off against going forward, that will definitely help them. And the same can be said for Maryland, because they do have that win over number 2 Wisconsin, then number 2 Wisconsin. And Maryland does look like a possible team that could make the NCAA tournament. But it still remains to be seen, because their non-conference schedule, they obviously went undefeated in, and then the conference schedule that they currently have, they haven't really pulled off too many standout wins other than the win over Wisconsin. So we'll see what happens with Maryland going forward. Back to the other notable matchups, we have Arizona State at number 2 Washington State. So Washington State is they're kind of there just because they've pulled off some good wins. And depending on what happens with Washington and Arizona State could depend on if Arizona State is still the hotter team in the Pac-12. I think Arizona State can beat Washington State, but Washington State has a lot of talent on their team, and they are not to be underestimated. And I think, to me, Washington State is probably the sleeper team of the conference, even though Arizona State is more of a sleeper team. This is the battle of the sleeper teams, and someone's going to be wide awake for this matchup. So, jumping over to the SEC, we have Ole Miss at number 22 Tennessee. Now, Ole Miss is having themselves quite the up and down season. They're trying to make the case for them to be an at-large team from the SEC. Problem is that losing to Mississippi State did not help their case, and then cooling off after a blistering hot non-conference schedule did not make matters any better. For Tennessee, this is another big week matchup for their week this week, as in addition to playing Florida on Wednesday, they play Ole Miss on Sunday. So for Tennessee, if they want to lock up a spot in the NCAA tournament for sure, they really, really have to find a way to win these certain matchups. I'm certain they can beat Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is not to be underestimated. They are a good team. They beat Western Kentucky, and I think, to me, Ole Miss is a sleeper team. I think they're a dark horse to possibly making the NCAA tournament from the SEC. Them and Arkansas probably, maybe. I think the big three from the SEC making the NCAA tournament is Kentucky, which will be the champion. You have Tennessee, and then you have Florida, and then you also have Texas A&M, which is in the hunt. You have Ole Miss, which is also in the hunt. Mississippi State, which is also in the hunt, which I think they have the better chance of the other in the hunt teams. And then you also have Arkansas, which is also drastically improved. So, all in all, for Ole Miss, a win over Tennessee would help their chances, but Tennessee has a lot of firepower. And Tennessee, after that ugly week last week against Kentucky, will need to run the table in order to persuade the committee to say, hey, Tennessee deserves to be in the NCAA tournament. So, we'll see. And then the final two matchups that are noteworthy to watch for this week on Sunday is number 13 UCLA at receiving votes Colorado. This is another one of those matchups where I think Colorado is going to need to come up big. Colorado also plays USC, but again, USC is still trying to figure it out, and USC is kind of running out of time when it comes to pulling off big-time wins. And they're also running out of time when it comes to possibly winning matches in general, and their margin of error is very thin. They cannot afford too many losses going forward. So, all in all, for USC and Colorado, they have to basically win some important matches. And basically November is the year, or is the month, where you cannot afford to lose. So we'll see what happens for Colorado this weekend. I have no doubt in my mind UCLA is going to beat Colorado, but I would not sleep on Colorado. I think Colorado is a good team, but against a tough UCLA team with Chaz McMay and Charity Looper, I think it's going to be very tough for them to win. So we'll have to wait and see. And then the last noteworthy matchup to watch for on Sunday is Florida State at number 14 Georgia Tech. I think this is a great matchup because Florida State is also trying to make the case that it deserves to be in the NCAA tournament. But for them, they're going to have to play their hearts out, and they're going to have to pull off some big wins, or at least run the table against the teams that they're supposed to beat. Like, Florida State does have that win over Florida, but the win over Florida is starting to look a little less strong than it appeared to be going into that match. So we'll see what Florida State has to offer, but I think Florida State can give Georgia Tech a battle. And that's going to do it for all the noteworthy matchups for this week. And that is going to do it for today's episode of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all. Without any further delay, let's drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you very much for tuning in to Set Point. I really appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at any point of the day, at any time, I appreciate you. Shout out to this chat room on Spreaker. I appreciate you tuning in. Shout out to Marcus Los Great for tuning in for a bit. Shout out to Beantown Brandon for tuning in for a bit. I see you. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball that's going on. I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. And I will also see you Saturday at Huntington Beach High School for the CIF Southern Section Division II Championship. Have a great night, everybody. Peace.